You're watching WTVY News 4, your hometown news leader.
Welcome back. We're about 7 minutes after the hour, and the 2013 Atlantic tropical season officially came to a close over the weekend.
And in all, there were over a dozen storms, but only 2 hurricanes, but none of them major. And starting today and every day this week, we'll be taking a look back at each one of these storms and the impacts they had. We're going to start with one that impacted parts of the U.S., ranging from Florida to the Northeast. Well, Tropical Storm Andrea formed in the Gulf of Mexico on Wednesday, as Chris said, marking the first storm of the 2013 Atlantic hurricane season.
Now we're starting to see a little more intensification of the Tropical Storm Andrea, with winds now up to 60 miles an hour.
This was what it looked like in Jacksonville yesterday, as heavy rain fell as tropical storm force winds blew through the city. And Andrea formed on June 5th and would make landfall in Florida's Dixie County to our southwest. It had sustained winds of 65 miles per hour, but didn't quite get strong enough to become a hurricane.
Despite that, the storm did produce heavy rip currents along the Alabama and Florida coasts, prompting multiple water rescues. It also spawned a few short-lived tornadoes. And less than 2 weeks later, another storm would form, this one further south. Well, we've had Andrea already this season, and now a new tropical depression has formed in the Gulf of Mexico. You're looking at the projected path of Tropical Depression number 2. Tropical Depression 2 officially became Tropical Storm Barry on Wednesday. Starting off as a depression on June 17th, the Tropical Storm Barry was not a very strong storm, but despite that, it did bring heavy rains to places like Mexico, Honduras, and Belize. This caused mudslides, and the storm closed schools and made travel dangerous for people in that region.
And that would be all for June, with the next storm forming in the Atlantic on July 7th.
Now a new system has formed in the Atlantic.
And it's named Chantal. Now Chantal is deep in the Atlantic.
Now to the tropics in our continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Chantal.
Yes, and this morning the storm is still not a hurricane, but it is bearing down on many islands in the Caribbean. And Chantal is probably most notable for not making landfall, but for moving very fast, as much as 30 miles per hour through the Atlantic, very high for a tropical system. And although you can see here how Puerto Rico prepared for the storm, it did not make landfall there and eventually dissipated on July 10th. And this morning we're starting with the 4th storm of the season from back in July, which began in a very traditional fashion for storms in the Atlantic. And we have some breaking weather news this morning. It's far from Alabama. A new tropical depression has formed in the Atlantic Ocean. A low pressure system off the coast of Africa became Tropical Depression number 4 just about an hour and a half ago. Dorian was gaining strength deep in the eastern Atlantic with sustained winds of 60 miles per hour. And after becoming a tropical storm on July 24th, Dorian gained strength, as you saw, and trade winds pushed the storm towards the west.
By the 27th, Dorian was no more. That was until the storm was reborn on August the 3rd, just off the eastern Florida coast. However, it didn't last long and broke up once again as it moved away from the Sunshine State without making landfall.
And it wasn't until mid-August when the 5th named storm of the 2013 season would form, very close to where Dorian had formed, in fact. And weather news, forecasters with the National Hurricane Center are watching a developing tropical storm this morning. Now, it's called Tropical Depression 5, and this morning it has sustained winds of 35 miles per hour.
Deep in the Atlantic Ocean, the 5th named tropical storm of the season in the Atlantic is being closely watched.
Like Dorian, Aaron formed off the coast of Africa, and on August 15th of this year, despite becoming a tropical storm quickly, it didn't strengthen very much due to wind shear and dry air in the area. Although it brought some rain and winds to the Cape Verde, the islands, it broke up in the central Atlantic after just 3 days.